Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. It is me, once again, Smooth Caramel, and I talk about rap, so that's what I'ma do. Now, my last video was going into why I believe rap isn't as exciting anymore, and this is a continuation of that. So on the off chance you stumbled across this before the other one, it's not actually that big a deal. Like, they talk about things from slightly different perspectives and whatnot. But I would recommend that you watch that, so check that out. But for now, I shall go on to the point I want to make for today. Now, last week I spoke about how collaborations are and have been effective, especially over time and in the past, and what makes them so effective. And this week I want to focus more on the aspect of collaboration from the combination of differing styles and genres and flavors. Now, I spoke briefly about unlikely combinations of artists, but do y'all remember who were the first artists that you saw collaborate that you didn't expect to see collaborating? For me, it was actually a late discovery because when I was in my second or third year of university, I was just looking for hip hop, and I've given up looking for new hip hop at this point. I don't know if you've seen my hip hop over time video, but that goes into that story a bit more. But I stumbled across this collaboration between two rappers that I greatly respect and came out around a similar time, Busta Rhymes and Eminem. And I remember just sitting in my self-contained bedroom / living room where I most of my life at that point. I say most of my life. I was socializing and whatnot. I just hosted a lot. But I remember the feeling just having it up on YouTube on my TV and thinking, how did I not know that this happened? And I bring this up because I think it's relevant to highlight the difference in how prominent these collaborations are in the music scene. Because how could I have missed that? Because I don't think there's any collaboration today between major artists that's going to be missed. It's going to be broadly advertised and pushed so that everybody can hear it and it becomes essentially unavoidable. Now, I had overlapping periods at one time in my teenage years where I couldn't stop listening to Busta Rhymes, and another close time when I couldn't stop listening to Eminem. My father could attest that this was borderline non-stop. I may have been banned from playing Touch It or any of its remixes while he was in the premises. And this did kind of make me wonder what they might sound like together. But I kind of just assumed it was a lost cause because I thought that if it would have happened, then I would have known about it. It would have been a prominent factor on one of their albums or a massive world-encompassing single. So I just thought, yeah, it's not them. They don't want to. Fair enough. Until that time when I did stumble across I'll Hurt You. But when I heard it, it was everything I'd hoped for. It was that rawness of Busta Rhymes and Eminem on a simple but dirty kind of sounding hip-hop beat where it had some sense of weight and drama to it, and allowed both of them to demonstrate their individual styles in a way that meshed well together. Even though I've never seen or heard of them collaborating before that, it felt like they just were on the same page immediately because the chemistry is there. And because of the surrounding factors in that I hadn't listened to any other songs of them together, but I've been listening to basically hundreds of songs by each of them, it built anticipation for what kind of style or sound would result from this combination of large-scale rappers. I had time to speculate and wonder what it would sound like, and thus it was a memorable discovery. It felt like an event. But this can only really happen with artists of similar presence and skill within the industry, ones that have cultivated their own brand and fan base, as well as collaborations not eclipsing the overall body of solo works. I mean, it's been 20 odd years and they've both been massive in the game, and as far as I'm aware, they've only collaborated together 2 or 3 times at most, even though they were both connected to Dr. Dre for a significant period of time. These days, newer rappers within similar conditions of prominence and links would have multiple spots on each other's works every month or so. That might be an exaggeration, but you can expect that they would feature a multitude of times throughout the year. On the other end of the spectrum, you would have those features that felt completely out of left field. Artists that you just never imagined would have worked together, or you would even have considered them to be compatible or even in the same lane or conversation when it comes to the rap music. In this case is one of my favorite actually. It's when you're blessed with something that you didn't even know you needed until you got it. Let It Be Known by Fonte and Sean Price. Sean Price, more gritty gangster rapper. I love his tagline, brokest rapper you know. Truly a late great. Fonte, a more refined, arguably conscious, even somewhat literary rapper. You wouldn't think that these artists would have any connection or inkling to actually collaborate with each other. At least not off the top of your head or when you're just listening to either of their works. They wouldn't often be of the same tone or style for you to even listen to them in the same kind of moods, or when you're cultivating playlists, they wouldn't usually be in the same playlist. But that track flipped expectations with one of my favorite songs to date. It's an amazing feat when you see these rappers using their own distinctive styles but also adapting somewhat to each other's, making something entirely new as a combination. It creates something that begins to exist outside the realm of what you would expect from these artists. And that in itself is something to be revered. I particularly like how it culminates in the chorus, because they're doing the same chorus, but it just sounds different for each of them, and that contrast in itself highlights the individuality of them, yet somehow still emphasizing the weight and meaning of the chorus, which essentially is just hype and self-aggrandization. It's a simple device, but there's something so powerful about a song that has at least a component or a chorus or a bar that is just, I command respect. That sense of empowerment from music is always going to be potent. These days, even the more surprising features aren't actually that surprising. I mean, since the overall industry seems to be algorithmically trying to enhance and optimize cross-promotion, where the algorithm may arrive with who needs to collaborate with who or who needs to cross with what genre, it all seems fairly predictable. It almost eliminates the possibility of a novel concept because it doesn't seem to occur as any type of a creative output or a genuinely creative output. Obviously, this is my perception, but I don't think it's too fringe a belief. I mean, in the last few years, rap and country crossing over a bit is being touted as something amazing and new, but it's not really that original or significant a feat as I see. I already experienced that kind of a feeling about 10 years ago when Snoop Dogg collaborated with Willie Nelson, Superman, and that song felt more unexpected as well as more creatively intentional. For one thing, it was smaller scale, which gave it a sense of intimacy, which enhances that feeling of it being overall and genuinely more collaborative, and personally so. Especially when you compare how it's manifesting now with rap and country, which seems to have been the somewhat inevitable product of pop rap converging with bro country. It doesn't feel like now these are the product of some kind of creative ambition more than doing it for the sake of it. And I remember a time when genre crossovers had more care and creative intent behind them, or at least that's how it comes across in the projects themselves. The most poignant example that I could discuss when it comes to this, which is also why I wanted to talk about this topic, would be the Reggae remix. So I was talking to my dad about music, as we do, and after my rap duo video, it was a conversation mainly about our favorite tropes in rap that I might go into talking about in a video at some point. It then resulted in this exchange. And when I sent that last message, it occurred to me. I missed that feeling of excitement that you would feel when a track is discovered or announced, when it really and truly felt like an event. Rap and reggae or dancehall crossing over is an example of when that can happen. Album-wise, I was very excited back in 2010 when Nas and Damian Marley Jr. Gong released an album entitled Distant Relative, indicative of what lays beneath the appeal when it comes to this type of a genre combination. Reggae remixes always felt like they came out of nowhere, which added to the anticipation, because no singular artist or group of artists were known to be dedicated towards them. There was no schedule or expectation that these particular artists were actually going to release them. They formed from the inherent cultural overlaps that exist for these associated genres. Given that hip-hop was a product of black culture in America, the culture itself predictably includes some Caribbean influence, and the conditions in which reggae or dancehall arose wouldn't be that dissimilar to that of hip-hop in America. Above that, the cultural intersection gives rise to a specific kind of response to specific demographics, particularly in those that are, like myself, black minorities in their countries of residence and of Caribbean descent. Having that and growing up at least partly with the culture, these genre clashes tend to end up feeling something akin to a family reunion or gathering. I shall explain. As a Londoner, I am officially and legally English, but I've scarcely identified as English or British. This means that the Caribbean culture that formed a significant part of my upbringing is quite deeply embedded and important to me. I know in Jamaica, or to those that have been raised in Jamaica, I would be seen as an English boy, but I would still be able to relate to some things that are very much Caribbean. I don't eat like an English boy, for example. Also, Caribbean rum is my lifeblood. With this being the case, some of my most treasured memories are the larger, further-reaching family gatherings, where you see all the relatives you didn't even know you had show up. And everybody seems to have varying degrees of similarity to each other. The amount of times I've met a new cousin, and by cousin, I just mean generic relation that is too difficult to trace back by specific term. But yeah, you meet a new cousin and then try to trace back that relation to see where the first mutual link is on the family tree. But these were always memorable for simple reasons. The main one being the overlap in the cultural influence is more wholly accessible, as well as engaging to those with the same dissonance in cultural heritage. It becomes what feels like two polar ends of that self-identified spectrum, allowing for a fuller, more visceral listening experience with the music and just overall experience when it's a family gathering. It's amazing being able to rap along to a song that's the hip-hop side of you, and then being able to jump into that more dancehall style singing and rapping and throw around some patois. Not too different a feeling to when the relatives from the islands actually come over to visit, or simply when there's a solid enough group of you that embrace it. It adds to that momentous feeling of reunion, and that translates into the response, which is very comparable to that of the reggae remix. It really does reflect this phenomenon. However, we don't even see them too much these days. You get the odd collaboration between a dancehall artist and an R&B singer or a known rapper somewhat often. Though the latest reggae remix I remember hearing was probably the This Is Why I'm Hot remix by Mims. And that was over 10 years ago. But it was and still kind of is a party or club favorite of mine. The closest thing to a reggae remix I remember in recent years would probably be Busta Rhymes' 2017 song Girlfriend. But that was just Busta embracing his cultural heritage rather than an event-like remix on an existing hip-hop track. It does make for an interesting and energizing song, but it doesn't have that same weight and scale to the inception of a reggae remix. The decrease in prominence itself could be due to various reasons. Maybe it was just a momentary blip in the music scene at the time. It was around late 90s, mid 2000s kind of time frame where they were really prominent. But I'm inclined to question whether it's the same conditions that are contributing to this diminishing excitement in rap that are making them less common. It's possible that, for example, there haven't been any ragga artists that actually feel that creative spark from any hip hop that's coming out these days. Or maybe there's just less respect for the state of rap or hip hop that's needed to incentivize this collaboration. Regardless, it's symptomatic of this predictable, unenthusing, and somewhat boring state of hip hop that we seem to find ourselves in these days. I almost wonder if collaborations themselves kind of were the issue because they were so successful that incentivized making more, and then they were saturated. It's a bit of a simplified explanation, but it could have been a very slow and gradual change as a result of their success. The first example I could give would be DJ Khaled, because This Is Why I'm Hot, with a whole roster of famous and respected rappers, was a big deal. I used to love that song. It was quite defined back in the day, but that same guy has now arguably contributed to the saturation the most these days.
Another one.
With collaborations that feel like algorithmic crossovers. I feel like at this point you'll get my point or not. So I guess I should move it along to the more obscure. Now the first one's gonna be a reggae remix. Clear the Air. Classic. Reminds me of Carnival. Probably not even the most obscure, but one that I think people need to be reminded of. The second one's gonna be Classic by DJ Premier, featuring KRS-One, Nas, and Rakim. Just real hip-hop, man. And I don't even intentionally keep bringing up DJ Premier. He's just a legend in the industry in ways that are somehow too noticeable and not noticeable enough. And the third one's gonna be Candy. Track by Snoop Dogg featuring a litany of rappers that's just so cool and well put together. It just keeps you bopping along and riding with the different rappers they contribute, as well as being kind of held down by Snoop Dogg's laid back delivery. All the contributors were very distinct, and that in itself is highlighted in the simplicity of the instrumental as well, so it's definitely an example of how a collaboration can feel like an event because of all the different contributors. But yeah, that's that. I'm gonna move on to the next video, whatever that may be. I've got like 3 scripts in progress now, so stay tuned for that. Like, comment, subscribe, and all that goodness. Otherwise, this has been another Smooth Caramel production.